Shogun, Episode 5, already halfway through the season, Broken to the Fist. And this week's title refers to the conversation that Toranaga actually has with his son after Toranaga arrives back to the village, and kind of makes a comparison to hunting when he's talking about him falling into the trap. In this case, falling into the trap refers to his son falling for the suggestion by Yabushige's nephew Omi, not necessarily what to do, but to take some type of action, and he does, because he's also wanting to impress his father, as you can see by their relationship. So he tells him that he has broken to another man's fist, and he essentially fell for this trap, and he compares it with his hawk while hunting, so I thought that was a really good scene. And because of this, he tells him until he kind of grows up, stops acting like a child, and starts to understand that people are playing you for a fool, he actually strips him of the cannon regiment. Also, let me say before we get into it any further, this episode was definitely a little bit darker, a little bit deeper as well than the previous episodes. Very good episode overall. The only really complaint I have so far with this show is the passage of time is not as obvious. I mean, if you catch the little scenes they purposely put in there, like there's more snow on the ground, obviously winter is here or winter is coming, and you can see that, like, for example, Blackthorn has learned a lot more Japanese. So other than those little things, it's kind of hard to tell how much time has passed, but apparently time has passed about 6 months or so, like they said in the previous episode, when Toranaga shows back up to the village. So they've been training every day for quite a while at this point. We see that the council can no longer vote because of Toranaga's resignation, so they're still trying to hold up. They're all vying for power, but they're trying to hold up the Taiko's word, and they're all trying to do that at least in front of each other, where they actually don't give a shit about his rule anymore because he's long gone, and they don't care about his son either, so he is actually in danger. But they all talk to each other like it's all Toranaga when they're all wanting some kind of power, at least Ishido. I don't think the other older guys I said before necessarily want to be Shogun, but Ishido definitely doesn't care about the Taiko's rule. He only says that in public. Again, that's his kind of public face or public heart. And of course, we learned when Toranaga shows up that Buntaro actually lives, so he had the help of some Ronin, apparently, to get the hell out of Osaka, and he says it took him about 20 days to get back to him in his village. So this is going to be awkward because, obviously, Mariko is living with Blackthorn as his interpreter, and now Buntaro has to live with him because that's his wife. And they have a little awkward conversation about the Anjin or whatever. He's still calling him a barbarian, but of course now he is Hatamoto and actually above Buntaro, so he has to live in his house under his rules. So this is going to be very awkward, as we see later in the episode. We see a scene here where Jozan's head is actually sent to Ishido. So this was a very common practice in the Sengoku Jidai warring states period, where heads were commonly collected and sent to other people to prove that this particular person had been killed. And although, again, in a modern day sense, this is very barbaric, it was very common back then, and they didn't see it barbaric in this whole warring states culture. And also I want to say that I'm really starting to like Fuji a lot. I said this last episode, but Fuji is becoming one of my favorite characters in the show as she talks to Buntaro, as she kind of despised Blackthorn at first, and now she's really starting to respect him in some way because of the things he's done. So I'm really loving Fuji as a character more and more, and I think she's got a big role to play in the next 5 episodes. And then we finally see Toranaga and Yabushibe talking about exactly what I said in the last few videos. Talk about him playing both sides of the fence, but Toranaga, of course, knows this, and he knows he's trying to put himself in the best position, but he intends to continue using him in some way to his advantage, and it ends up being that even though it seemed like a brash move for his son to kill Jozen, that it ends up being a good thing anyway, because if there's going to be a war, they will have to leave Osaka and come to them and attack them there on their turf and their territory, as opposed to them trying to siege a city. So he actually rewards Omi for planting the idea in his son's head with the cannon regiment, which I'm sure is another strategy he's going to use to his advantage as well. And as we saw in the past few episodes as well, they still talk about this spy in the village as far as Yabushige, and he tells his nephew Omi to go find the spy. And he sends one of his men back to Osaka as well to try to patch things up with Ishido, as again, he's still trying to put himself in the best position. And again, I said last episode, I can't really blame him. We see Blackthorn approach Mariko, and he's kind of worried about what's going to happen when Buntaro comes in, because he's got to live with them, and they, of course, just got it on last episode, so that's going to be very awkward. So he's like, is there anything I should prepare for? As in, am I going to kill this dude? But we see him show up, and he greets him and treats him with respect. And of course, at first, Buntaro is still very standoffish, and essentially still calls him a savage and all that as well, and has no respect for him. But he tries to do a polite thing, and this is kind of where Fuji's starting to respect him as well. He makes this English dish, I think he called it rabbit stew. And of course, they refuse to eat it because it smells horrible. When he hung this bird outside as well, which I thought at first he used the bird to make the stew, but apparently it was still hanging out there, as we saw later in the episode. Perhaps he did use part of that bird that he was gifted to him by Toranaga. So then, of course, they have dinner, and they start the whole manly pissing match, where they start to drink sake from a big bowl. He's saying, where I come from, this is how we drink, and Buntaro does the same to try to prove his worth as well, and they both get plastered. And essentially, Blackthorn challenges him, and Buntaro starts a bow contest, even though he's flat out drunk. He says, choose a post, and he puts 2 arrows to the same damn hole right in front of his wife's face, and that's what we saw in the trailer, that slow motion shot of the arrows going right by her nose. And this kind of brings up the whole past of Mariko that we said we was going to learn about last week. So we find out the full story here of what's going on with Mariko and her past, and why she was shamed and had to marry Buntaro in the first place, because Blackthorn brings up why he doesn't treat his wife with more courtesy. And, essentially, he doesn't understand these cultural things, how they're treated essentially as property. But Buntaro asks him to tell her about her real name and her past, which she started to bring up last week, but we never got the full story. So her father in the show was Akechi, just like in real-life history, who assassinated, in the show at least, or the book, Lord Garada. And because he was his master at one point, Akechi was branded a traitor and dishonored her and her whole family by assassinating his own master because he thought he was going mad. And Mariko, of course, was not allowed to commit seppuku. She wanted to die, just kind of mirroring Fuji's story as well. And so she has to continue to live, and that is her punishment, essentially. And she is dishonored in everyone's eyes because she is the daughter of a traitor. And of course, just like a lot of things in this show and this book, this mirrors real Japanese history. Akechi actually killed Oda Nobunaga, and I believe this was in the year 1582. Now, Nobunaga was considered one of the 3, or the first, great unifiers of Japan. He actually almost ruled all of Japan before his death. And to clarify really quickly, Mariko's father didn't actually kill him. He actually took his own life, but he was already defeated. He had surrounded his castle, and he had nowhere to go and had very few men with him at the time. And both for the real world and the show, or the book, Nobunaga's death would allow Hideyoshi to become Taiko, essentially, and that's who we saw die in a previous episode, because he was also on the same level as Akechi, but he got revenge for his master's death, stopped in mid-battle, asked for peace, and turned around and went back and took on Akechi and his men to get revenge for his master. She is essentially cursed to live because she is the disgraced daughter of a traitor. And then apparently after this conversation, Blackthorn at some point passes out. They all go to bed, whatever, but apparently Buntaro actually beats Mariko. And you can kind of hear him speaking, basically saying, this is all your fault. And Blackthorn actually confronts him, but he actually pulls out his sword and bows to Blackthorn and actually asks for forgiveness for causing problems within his home. I don't know if this is a moment of clarity for him, because he does realize that he is an honorable guy and he is technically above him in rank. But he, of course, blames the sake, which, of course, Blackthorn is not buying. That is no excuse to beat his wife. And, of course, you can tell that he actually is starting to love Mariko. And then we get a quick shot of Mujari, the spy, again, who meets with Toranaga and his son, where they kept the birds he was spinning back and forth to Osaka. Yabashige is really sick of being one-up by Toranaga. He always knows what's going on, and he's always 3 steps ahead. Mariko also tells Blackthorn that she refuses even to hate her husband Buntaro because it would give him some kind of satisfaction. And she essentially tells Blackthorn, from this point, our relationship is only professional. And then we get back to Blackthorn's house, which a lot of this took place in, so I thought this is a really good episode, kind of getting to know these characters really in depth here. And the gardener apparently took the bird, and Fuji apparently killed him, or had him killed. At least we thought so from their conversation, but of course Fuji doesn't understand Portuguese or English as we're hearing it. And we get the full story from Mariko later, who the gardener was sick anyway, because Blackthorn's words, the way he described hanging that bird up there, he said anybody touches it will die. He's the head of that house. He gave that power, and therefore he was going to die anyway. So he took the bird down. Everybody hated the smell. So essentially Blackthorn hears all this and kind of blames himself. He basically thinks that he killed the gardener. And this is obviously a guy we saw him talking to earlier about the rock, which he goes and checks on later. He starts to really get frustrated with this culture and this death everywhere, and everybody has to die for whatever reason. And he just doesn't get it. He doesn't think they value life, when in fact it's the exact opposite. But these customs are so strange. He actually goes to Toranaga and says, look, our deal's up. I've trained your little army. I'm asking for my ship and my men so I can go home and not come back to Japan. Toranaga's not really having it, and then we get the scene where we have the earthquake/landslide. Toranaga gets kind of caught in this landslide, and Blackthorn and some other guys save him again and gives him the swords that he has, which actually is Fuji's father's. And Toranaga laughs for the first time in the whole entire damn show. He laughs like, what is going on here? Why are we so connected? You saved me again, and why are you so willing to? So really a lot of respect between these two. Really good scene there, although it was a terrible scene in the sense of the tsunami that destroyed the whole damn village. And that's when Blackthorn goes back and checks on Fuji and he is relieved that she is still alive. So I want to say, there's some dynamics there where obviously he likes Mariko, but seems to be there's some feelings for Fuji as well, and Fuji seems to kind of reciprocate that as well. Really appreciate him checking on her. So I don't know if that's necessarily romantic or whatever, but it seems to be very respectful in the least. And then we see another scene where Muraji again is telling Yabushige, still looking for the spy, that the spy was actually the gardener who died anyway. So he saves his own ass. He remains Toranaga's spy, and that was a perfect play to use that death to say that the gardener lived here and that he just died yesterday. So now they're no longer looking for the spy, which gives Muraji free reign to continue spying. And then here in the final scene, we see what was mentioned in the first of the episode where Ochiba, this is the mother of the heir to the Taiko, is actually returned to Osaka, and she is essentially the most powerful woman in Japan, being the mother of the heir who is going to be the next Taiko, or so they think. And essentially the episode goes off with her demanding that the time for politics is over, and now the council will answer to her. Now, of course, we'll see how this actually goes in the next couple episodes, but that's how the episode closes, with her making a big power move, and it was clear in previous episodes where we saw the Taiko dying that her and Toranaga have some kind of past, so we'll see how that plays out. It's going to be very interesting. So really, really good episode. Again, kind of a darker, grittier episode, but I really, really enjoyed it. So anyway, let me know what you think in the comments below. As usual, thank you for all the support, especially you guys on Patreon, and a huge shout out to my Patreon executive producers, and thank you to channel members as well. You guys keep this channel going. So thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.